First, I'm going to introduce myself. Again, I'm Ximena Contla. I'm the product manager for the Deep, and this is Ewan.
Hey, I'm Ewan. I'm the executive director of Data Friendly Space and the technical lead for the Deep platform. We're the organization that builds and maintains Deep, and we also use it quite heavily.
So this talk was supposed to be like a little bit of a wrap-up of the whole day. So today we presented in this space the problem that humanitarian data poses, and why it is so important for us to work on this. We basically mentioned that we had two types of data that we normally deal with. We have a lot of quantitative data related to the amount of people that gets, affected by conflict, affected by natural disasters. And then we have also qualitative data. And this is the bunch of data that it's basically unstructured, it's basically very difficult to grasp, and it requires a lot of time for people to process it. So today, we saw like the whole bunch of problems and challenges that poses, and then how we're trying to solve it. So I will say that, just to wrap the day up, it's we look into the different models that now we're applying on how we try to solve this issue, and at the end of the day, how or what do we think that we're gonna have. So I'm gonna have just this question for you, Ewan. You that have been in this sector and developing this tool, because Ewan is basically the one who said like, hey, I am coming to this sector to help out, and there's no tool that can help me do this basic job. So from that moment that you landed in Nepal to this moment that you are here, 5 years afterwards, like 7 years afterwards, how is it that you see this evolution, and what do you think that it's gonna be like, happening afterwards?
That's a good question. 7 years really does go by pretty quickly. Yeah, when I started, there were definitely some qualitative data analysis tools available, but none were specific for the humanitarian community. And I think it's really important to have something custom built, especially that will allow data sharing and collaboration more easily. Whereas if everyone's just using a qualitative data tool on their desktop or whatnot, then information really gets siloed pretty quickly. In addition, by building something custom, we can use these NLP models, and we can do a lot of other specific modules for the humanitarian community that wouldn't be available elsewhere. In terms of where I think it's going to go, I certainly see machine learning and natural language processing taking a more central role. I think as time goes forward, all these manual tasks that the analysts do on the platform will start to become more automated. And for me, it's, if you think about like what routine things you would do you did 15 or 20 years ago that a computer does now, right? I think eventually doing this type of annotation will be really a background task, and the main task of people using this tool will be to do critical thinking and analysis. The idea being that, the human brain can really do some amazing things, but reading through 50-page PDF documents saying this sentence is in this geographic region and talks about this whatever, is definitely a critical thinking task, but it's something that we can get pretty good at automating, I'd say. And then taking that a step further, I think where I see this going is really sort of an information engine for the humanitarian community. I think there's lots of data available in online repositories that can be used to create some sort of like intelligent agent, if you will, that will be able to, you'll be able to interact with it in regular dialogue, and you'll be able to automatically generate charts and graphs and things like that. again, I think we're quite a ways away from that, but I really think that talking about like private sector collaborations, as the private sector continues to innovate and do more work that is beneficial to Deep, that is open source eventually, then I think it'll certainly benefit from it. So I think there's some obviously innovations that we have to do ourselves, but there's quite a lot that I think we'll be able to borrow from work in the private sector, because what I see is, and you tell me if you disagree, but a lot of innovation happens in the private sector and it's closed source, and then eventually it kind of becomes open source and can be used elsewhere. So eventually a lot of these new things will be usable for Deep, and that'll be great. And as a platform and its involvement in the humanitarian community, it's certainly taking more of a central position in terms of being used by organizations for this analysis process. And I'm pretty happy with how that's happened, especially because it's happened all quite organically and through word of mouth and through people using the tool. And I hope that continues to grow. And I mean, ultimately, I hope the tool is beneficial and it saves people time and makes humanitarian organizations more efficient, because that's really, at the end of the day, the purpose of why we do it. What about you?
Okay, so just a couple of reflections after what you just said. I found it very interesting that we as humans are still thinking, in terms of, very egocentric, like this thing is mine, you see, like I develop it, so it's mine. And just basically what this tool is telling you is like, well, this thing, it's ours. And that sole thing, it just makes it a little bit, for me, it just makes it, more useful, more open, and I still don't understand why is it that most of the development still gets into the private sector. I know that it's because of money, but at the end of the day, when I see, for example, the beautiful minds that we have developing this tool, I said, like, I think we're good. I don't think that it needs to be fair. I don't think we need, or this proves basically that we not necessarily need all of the money or all of the tech that the private sector has in order to develop something that is robust, that it works, that is useful for a huge amount of people. And I think that's basically what makes it very noble. So I like that. And for example, myself, I had a previous training, in my past life before being the Ewan project manager. I was a data analyst myself in the humanitarian sector, and normally for qualitative analysis, we were using other tools that are super expensive to work with, and they were not collaborative, and it's very few people that have access to them. So I believe that what we're doing here is trying to put a tool that is, of course, targeted to the humanitarian sector, but that it can be used like basically anywhere. So if you are a researcher, whatever, you can build your own framework in here, and you can do it, for free, basically. So this kind of thing, for me, it opens also the possibility to see the product as something that is useful for others, and that's why I think it's very nice to be able to work for Deep in that sense. Besides that, I think, again, I'm very excited to be able to say that this is the first time that I see AI really working for the humanitarian sector in all of the years that I was there. And this is not a little thing, even if it looks like very simple. We went through the whole day seeing how complex this data is. And sometimes we think like, yeah, there's a lot of data and whatever. But at the same time, in the humanitarian sector, as we saw, for example, yesterday, that sometimes not a lot of data, or sometimes not data. So I will see this tool helping us going forward to look into new ways of helping also those ones that are on those vulnerable situations. For example, what if we have some information extracted from this and we can plug it in a network and see it with information that organizations like the Red Cross or IOM has, in terms of people that are missing? Can we start making sure that we fill in the gaps on that information, using information from different sources, and really have an impact on the humanitarian setting by literally just creating, tools that will allow us to extract this information more easily. So I think that's something that personally I believe it's very useful, and something that I would like also, to see moving forward, and someone that probably would be interested on doing this kind of research. That would be a lot of fun. I will also, and then I will send back to you.
The impact is an interesting question. Obviously, the ultimate aid of the humanitarian community is to provide assistance to those who are most in need because of conflicts and disasters and other types of hazards. But this tool doesn't go and hand out assistance to refugees, right? It's not a robot or something that does that. It'd be cool, but that's not what it does. When you work on systems like this, you're really working at as a support function to a much larger humanitarian community. So if you think about tracing the step of a package of aid being delivered to somebody, there's so many things that happen to make that assistance. There has to be donors, there has to be logistics, there has to be operations, there has to be fundraisers, there has to be, you name it, right? So it's all part of like a really large system. And I think we'd be naive to think that DEEP wasn't a part of something way larger, and so it becomes quite challenging to think about the impact that the tool has. Really, we gave a presentation yesterday with someone from IOM, which is the International Organization for Migration, and they've been developing an NLP tool. And she was talking about impact, and she said that information from their data set was used by a global report by the UN Secretary General, which was, quite prestigious and quite interesting. But what does that matter? Just because your number's in a fancy report, it doesn't necessarily mean that anybody's acted on it. And similarly with the output from DEEP, there's definitely activities done with it that we feel pretty confident that it's having impact. But a lot of projects in DEEP are kind of at a global level, and so it's really hard to say what it does, right? I think it's definitely a force for good, but there's a lot of things that happen in the humanitarian community, and this definitely is part of a lot of other things. So I think as an organization, it's a challenge for us to figure out what the impact is. And what's also frustrating is that there isn't necessarily a feedback loop. So when these reports get published and shared, someone could look at it and it could totally inform $1 million of humanitarian assistance and, impact the lives of thousands of people. Or it could be a report that's a PDF and someone glances at it and then that's it. So it's kind of like that. I think to the general public, there is a bit of a glamorization about humanitarian work in terms of providing assistance to those in need. And while I think the humanitarian community certainly does that, I think there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that isn't quite as glamorous. But I think that for me personally, having an IT and data background, this is kind of the best that I can do. I could go to the field and I could go and hand out aid and whatnot. But I think for me at least, having this technical skill, this seems like the best use for it. And it seems like something that, as I mentioned earlier this morning, is definitely in short supply in the humanitarian community. So I don't know, it's kind of a ramble about it. But at the end of the day, it definitely can be a little frustrating, I think, in terms of knowing what impact you have. But I think my guide is kind of, I know that I could be doing this work for, and no offense to anyone here, like a bank or like a car company, and that's fine work. There's nothing wrong with it. But I would really know at the end of the day that I'm probably not doing anything that is really beneficial for society. And so even if the work I do here is like, yeah, maybe it's doing something, it's got a better chance than what I was doing over there. So it's somewhat uplifting way of saying that you got to hope it makes an impact.
Good karma points. Yeah, and I will also like to ask, well, basically our NLP advisor here, Navid, if you want to come closer, would be cool. To basically, maybe you have been working with NLP and you have been working with this for a long time. So can you please also say why is this very challenging and why is it that, kind of drags you to work for NLP for the humanitarian community? Because sometimes, it's very challenging as we saw, but maybe you can also, highlight some of the challenges and what are some of those differences and why is it that you think it is important?
Thanks for the question. I mean, I think it's a good time for myself to reflect on it, right? I don't know. I think I was just following the flow. But no, I think partly is that working especially in technical area and the AI at the moment, beside all of the cool things that happens, which sometimes really something sensible, but sometimes it's hype. Beside all of the interesting things that happen in academia, such as doing a research on something and then putting a problem for yourself and trying to solve that and trying to show something, trying to show how intelligent you are. All of these things that is very common in computer science. And especially in the communities related to natural language processing, AI, etc., etc., there is some feeling in me that there is something missing here, and sometimes the cause that why we are doing what we are doing is basically missing in what we are doing. So most of the time we are just basically making tools, and these tools are cool, at least for some time. But sometimes so these things sometimes happen so quickly and so fast that we don't really step back and ask ourselves that's why we are building this tool or why it should be the way it is. So I think at some point of my life I tried to ask this question, that's what the hell I'm doing and why I'm doing these things that I'm doing. And I think that was just an accident that we met each other and I found just a question and the vision about that really interesting, that you build up a tool that probably not, but might also help some people. At least you can have the hope that it does. And it gives a cause, a reason that you know, why this specific question and not 1,000 other domains and questions that can be approached. I think that was a really driving point for me, but also topics such as ethics that is concerned here and the biases that are concerned here, etc. And I hope that we kind of have people that are always not just on one side, but have a more holistic vision about what they want to do. And it's not only the technical parts, but it's always the combination of the different aspects. It's not necessary that this project is a fantastic project or there are not other projects that can also help people, but I think that there is some sort of beauty in this project that I can really appreciate that. But on the other side, we should see that it's kind of a frustrating also in some point. So it's a new thing. We're kind of drilling into something that hasn't been before. So we are providing the data. This data is completely new. It's different from the other domains. And usually being the first, being the pioneers in one area is usually the toughest part, right? Because you have always the questions that never asked before. You need to do a lot of things that you are the first one, so you have to do that, and that might not be necessarily very fantastic or very fun, or different things maybe that's different in different other domains. So I think that there is this hard part of the humanitarian domain, because we are kind of pioneering it, and there are questions that never asked before that makes it hard, and sometimes the results that we get are not as fantastic as we are expecting before then. But on the other side, we can just say that, yeah, that's it. This is the challenge, and we are going through that, and we may just provide a road for the other people who want to take this path further. A very interesting thing and good thing about the DEEP project is also the not only being open source, but the openness of that. So I think that is personally also important, because I believe whatever we are doing should bring some benefits, not only to the humanitarian sector, but also to the whole of the machine learning community, which, in my opinion, is a very necessary aspect.
Yeah, I appreciated what you said about reflecting or not reflecting on what one does as a career. And I think it's very important from time to time to ask yourself, why are you doing what you're doing? And I mean, this is getting kind of philosophical, but and if it feels important to you and if you feel like it matters. I think for me, that's what got me into doing this work, was I just felt like what I was doing with my career wasn't really meaningful to me. And I still ask myself that question, why, when I'm frustrated with dealing with bureaucratic organizations and spend most of my time just like playing politics, when at some point I was like a data guy. But alas, that's how it is. And, you know, it's something that needs to happen in order to make the rest of it happen. One question I did have for you is, you teach, so how do you feel like when you talk to this work about your students, how do they perceive it? And how do you feel like, what are their kind of ambitions like in terms of considering, you know, the social or ethical considerations of their future careers?
It's a hard question, because I can't really also say something from the side of my students, of course. But I can say that, I mean, generally our education, especially in university, is in the sense that we just really separate things from each other. Like, these are the technical parts and these are the humanitarian parts, and we don't really like each other, or we don't have anything to do with each other. There are like 1 or 2 courses about something, and everybody hates these courses because also they're nothing really related or interesting or relevant, basically. I wouldn't blame the students. I would mostly blame the system, because it's very, very well separated. It's just too separated from each other. And then when you suddenly start talking about something else, it seems to be offshore. It seems to be something that is different from what should be taught. But I have the feeling that if you have if you can create this bridge, which is a tedious job, just this bridge between one area to the other area, like put something that belongs to some other context and translate it to a different domain and make them understandable for the others, it's really appreciated. So when the people can really connect with that, then they also bring new energy to that. They do something that you would not expect in a usual case. And this happens very rarely, but sometimes it gives me very good feeling. So it's definitely also part of that.
Thanks.
Okay, so now I think we're gonna open this also for some questions from the people listening to you. Anything, from NLP questions? deep or deep questions. No. We can also go very philosophical here. So yeah, first, thank you guys for also sharing that part. I think it is very, very important to be reminded to us that things are not really separated one from the other. That's really some sort of, I'm going to use this word. Yes, I'm going to do it. Like some bullshit thing that we're doing to ourselves, you know? So we bullshit ourselves and say, hey, this is the separation, but there's not. So anything. Is there any question for the panelists from here? Or are we done questions for today? Are we very tired, right? It looks like that. Everyone has a tired face. So anything that you would like to say to conclude this day, and some of the ideas on how this can actually be seen in the future? Ewan, Navid, and then Weird.
Ideas for the future. I mean, I think as the NLP team, I hope that we can continue to grow and keep getting great people. I think we have a really nice, diverse background in terms of where people come from and what their academic and professional backgrounds are like. And I think I've been really impressed with the contributions from all the members of the team. So I hope that can, of course, continue to grow in the future and get more open source contributions and whatnot. For today, I guess just thanks for everyone again, Ximena, for putting it together. I know we've been working on this for like a while. When did we start? when did we submit? Like 8-10 months ago, I guess. So it's been a while, and it's cool to finally see it come together. And unfortunate to see it go, but alas, that's how it goes. Hopefully, you can be back next year and go to some other conferences as well.
Yeah, as a last comment, I mean, we are a very open team. A part of my job is just to modularize the different questions and challenges that exist in this system. And in any capacity that you think that you want to collaborate with us in any form, we are super happy about that. We are super open about that. And yeah, just take a step forward, and that would be great. And finally, yes, thanks also Ximena for the fantastic job of the result is all these days.